everybody. Welcome to Talking Hockey Sense. I'm Chris Peters. It is episode 124 of the podcast. We are back from vacation. We are rested. We are ready. We are ready to get back into it and really set the table. It's July, the middle of July, or towards the end of July, and it's time to set the table for the 2025 draft, which we're going to do on today's show. We're going to talk about that. Also going to be heading to the World Junior Summer Showcase next week. We're going to preview that event because there are two of the top prospects for this draft, two of the very top prospects that will be participating in that event. FloHockey will be there providing coverage. I will be doing some analysis and other things there. We're also going to be working on some projects that are looking forward to the World Junior Championship. So we will talk about that. We're also going to briefly preview the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, though rosters aren't made yet, so it's a little bit tough to do that. But that is coming up in just a couple of weeks here, and that really kicks off the 2025 NHL draft season. So before we talk about 2025 and the NHL draft, I did want to remind you, if you haven't yet, please do subscribe to this podcast on your audio apps of choice. You're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, you can download the audio of this show, Talking Hockey Sense. And also you can catch us on YouTube or on FloHockey.tv or via the Flow Sports app. All good ways to follow this show, and hopefully you've been enjoying the show. We've had a couple of weeks off, took a little bit of a break, and now it's time to set the table. And that's really all we're doing today. There's a lot that will change over the course of the 2025 NHL draft season. It is a long way away to next June, but we can at least talk about what this season is going to bring, especially since the World Junior Summer Showcase is going to feature two of the very top prospects. So let's get that NHL draft look ahead started. If you haven't yet, I do have a way too early top 10 on FloHockey.tv. You can also go to the FloHockey YouTube page and watch the video kind of breaking down the top 10 a little bit more. We've got some highlights. We've got some footage of players that you'll want to watch, guys that were on FloHockey last season. There were certainly a number of them, and there will be more this season as well with all the junior leagues that we have. So if you do want to follow the 2025 NHL draft, a great way to support our work is by subscribing to FloHockey to make sure that you are watching all the great footage that we have and also the great live content that we have and will have next season. So lots to look forward to there. So we got the top 10 done, and I'm not going to rehash that whole thing here because I've already done a video for it, already have written about it. But obviously the top of this class is what's going to be very fascinating. You've got James Hagens, who is kind of the consensus number one heading into the season. But I would say that his status as the number one prospect isn't set in stone. That is probably one of the things that I really want to, kind of hone in on, because I think there are two guys at the top of this draft that are going to challenge James Hagens. They play the game a bit differently than James Hagens. And while I think that Hagens is the most skilled, has the best hockey sense, has some speed elements, both of these players are bigger and stronger. And so as we saw in the last draft, that can make a difference. And now Macklin Celebrini was 5'11", or is 5'11", and not necessarily the biggest guy, but he plays a very aggressive game, and so he kind of goes with that. Now, James Hagens isn't going to have that physical element to his game. He's very competitive. He's also, very aggressive, but still doesn't have the size nor the strength to be a physical presence the way that Celebrini did. Now, a big summer heading into Boston College, which is where he's going to play next season, can really help James Hagens be that more physical presence, be harder to knock off pucks. But he is fast, he is shifty, and he is going to play on one of the best teams in college hockey next season with Boston College. And he's also very, very likely to take the place of Will Smith, who left for the San Jose Sharks as the number one center. That's going to give him a lot of leeway to be a big-time player in college hockey next year. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and predict that he's going to win the Hobey Baker like the two top draft prospects in college hockey over the last two seasons. I think there's a lot of competition that will be on his own team next year, and there's going to be other players like Zeev Buium, who had such an explosive season. There's just going to be so much competition for the Hobie Baker next season. So we're not going to go ahead and predict that. But I do think that that's going to be kind of the bar that is set. And it's maybe unfair to James Higgins that that's the bar that's set with Fantilli and Celebrini over the last 2 seasons. But it's going to be really interesting. But as I mentioned, there is going to be competition. The 2 players that are primarily competing against James Higgins at this juncture for me as the number 1 potential prospect, Anton Frundell from Sweden, who we've talked about in this podcast before, Porter Martone from Canada, who we've talked in this podcast before. Both players are outstanding. They are skilled, and they can produce. Last year at the U20 level, Anton Frundell, 39 points in 29 games. He also played some games in the SHL in the Allsvenskan. And so that is an opportunity for him to continue to raise the level of his game. And in Allsvenskan, he didn't produce very much. He did get 9 games pro, but in 29 games, 39 points as a U17 player. He also was a dominant player at the under 18 level. Now he's going to be at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, and we're going to preview that later, but he is going to be there. And that is going to be a real opportunity for him to kind of set a new bar. Meanwhile, Higgins and now Porter Martone, who I mentioned, they will be at the World Junior Summer Showcase, which will be where I will be watching the top 2 players. I'm very excited to see how they look there. Now, Porter Martone had a tremendous season, and playing for the then Mississauga Steelheads, now going to be the Brampton Steelheads next season. He had 71 points in 60 games last season. Now he's also, like James Higgins, a late 06 birth date, whereas Frundell is an 07. And that age thing does matter because Frundell is not only an 07, he's a May of 07. So he's midway through the year, and that makes him the younger of these 3 players, the youngest of these 3 players. You also have, other players in the mix there, but really Frundell and Martone, I think, are the ones that are going to be the challengers. And Martone is big. He's 6'3". He's listed at 170 pounds. I think that he'll probably weigh in a little bit heavier than that over this summer. He is kind of, over the last 2 seasons has played in a lot of high-level competition. He played at the under-18 Worlds as an underager, as a draft -2 player, and then last year captained the team, had 17 points at that tournament as Canada won gold. It was the second highest point total ever by a Canadian at that tournament. Gavin McKenna, his own teammate, the reason that he did not have the record. So very intrigued. The 2 things, the things I think that allows James Higgins to be the separating factor here is the speed factor that he has. I do think he's the best skater of that group. He's got some high-end hockey intelligence, and there's that shiftiness and his ability to be a shot pass threat. I think both of the other players have more power elements in their game. Anton Frundell, we saw him dominate at the under-18 Five Nations last year. He was injured, couldn't play in the under-18 World Championship, and that really made Sweden almost non-competitive in that tournament. And so that was certainly interesting to see that. So those are the 3 guys that we'll be zeroing in on, and each of them will be in action over the next couple of weeks. Martone and Higgins at the World Junior Summer Showcase, and then Frundell at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, which will also feature Gavin McKenna, who is the 2026 top prospect. He will be playing for Canada there, not going to the World Junior Summer Showcase, even though I think he is very, very likely to be part of Canada's World Junior team in Ottawa next winter. Other things about the 2025 class that I think are going to be interesting to track. The defense in this class is going to be very interesting, but I do think there is a clear front runner at this stage of the game, and that is Matthew Schaefer of the Erie Otters. I like the player a lot. I was enthralled by him at the World Under-18s. The poise that he plays with, the hockey sense, the skating ability is elite. And that is what I think will really allow him to be one of those real guys that is going to push it for the defenseman this year. Now, you look at his numbers last season, not amazing, 17 points in 53 games. But I do think that the points are going to come a little bit more this season. I think that he's going to find his stride. He's going to take charge more as an as a draft eligible player. And, I think Erie's going to have a pretty competitive team. They also have Malcolm Spence, who's, projected top 10 top 15 player right now. You look at the defense, and Sasha Boumedienne, the Swedish player, played for Youngstown last year, going to Boston University a year early. So this is another situation where BU is going to have a 17-year-old freshman on their roster. However, this is a 17-year-old freshman that is going to be playing defense at the collegiate level. Very difficult to do. Last year we saw Zeev Buyum and Artem Levshinov have tremendous seasons, but both of those guys were late birth dates from the previous year, from the previous birth year. So that allowed them to be there. The other guy, and I know if you have read my top 10, one of the biggest questions I got is, where is Logan Hensler? And he just missed out on that top 10. And I'll tell you why. I think Logan Hensler is a heck of a player. One of the best skating defensemen in this draft. He has size. He can defend. I think that, he had good numbers last year. He had 32 points in 61 games. Not bad, but also I felt at times last season I wanted to see more from him offensively. I thought there was a lot more for him to give, and I just think that in terms of hockey sense and different things like that, that's where he kind of got left on the outside of the top 10. Now we're talking about a top 10 list over a year, or just under a year in advance of the draft. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. But he's a 6'2" right shot defenseman who skates absolutely beautifully. And I think that, next year at the University of Wisconsin, it's going to be very interesting to see, because he's going to be playing for a coach in Mike Hastings, who at times, will lean on the older players. If Hensler gets top 4 minutes, if he's getting the reps that he needs, if he's getting all of those things, he has got a chance to be one of the best freshman defensemen in the country, and really a guy that's going to be a difference maker for his team. And if he does that, I think that he could push himself into that top 10 conversation. And I think that he's hovering right around it. So I just wanted to address that, because the Logan Hensler question was certainly one that was there, and I wanted to address. So that's why he wasn't in the top 10, but very well could get into that mix. He's a player I have a lot. I really like. He will be at the World Junior Summer Showcase next week, so I will get a real good up close and personal look at Logan Hensler, a player I've watched a lot over the last season, because of obviously watching a lot of the draft eligibles on his team last year. He was at the NTDP, so that is another name to definitely keep an eye on. The other thing that's going to be really fascinating is, as it was last year, we saw the top 2 players in the NHL draft come directly from the NCAA. We saw Zeev Buyum go in the top 15, another direct from the NCAA. There will be 4 top caliber players for this year's draft from the NCAA. We talked about Hagens, we talked about Hensler, we talked about Boumedienne, and there's also going to be Cullen Potter. And Cullen Potter, to me, is going to be one of the most fascinating cases of this entire draft. Now, he was at the National Team Development Program last year, played for the Under-17 team all season, did not get called up for the World Under-18 Championship, but he was one of the best players on the Under-17 team. He's the son of legendary women's hockey player Jenny Potter, an Olympian, a gold medalist, a world champion many times over, a former coach at Ohio State, a lot of different things that she has done in her career. But Cullen Potter is doing something that is very, very, very rare. And in fact, only 2 other players have done this at the National Team Development Program, where they left the NTDP early to enroll in college a year early. The 2 guys that did it were Zach Werenski and Noah Hannafin, 2 excellent NHL players, 2 guys that were top 10 picks in the NHL draft. The difference between those guys, both of them had, and really more Hannafin, had opportunities with the under-18 team, played up, got opportunities, and we got to see them at that level. Cullen Potter, we have not seen. But Cullen Potter was supposed to go to Michigan State University. That's where he was committed, and it was going to be for next season, not this upcoming season, but the season after, so 25-26. He decided that he wanted to accelerate. Michigan State did not have a place for him this season. And quite frankly, I think there was some doubt about readiness as well. Enter Arizona State, and Arizona State recruits Cullen Potter, and they say, we do have a spot for you. Now, Arizona State is going into the NCHC next season. It is a tough physical conference, and Cullen Potter is not a big player. He is very fast. He is very skilled. He's smart. But he is not, he does not have the size profile, that physical readiness that you expect. He's, last season he was measured at 5'9", 161. I believe that his weight is up, and maybe he's closer to 5'10". He definitely has the speed, but 46 points in 54 games for the NTDP last season. 8 points in 7 games at the World Under 17 Challenge. As I mentioned, did not get called up to the Under 18s for the Under 18 Worlds. And so there are a lot of questions about, is this going to be the right move for him? I think it is a big risk to take in your draft season. And Arizona State, this is probably the biggest recruit that they've gotten. Blue chipper, no doubt about it. A year ahead of schedule. That is a good strategy to say we can get a top end player if we allow him to come in a year early. But the question is this going to be the best thing for Cullen Potter's development, for his draft stock, for his opportunity to, showcase himself for scouts? And he's going to have to earn everything, and he's going to have to get, all those opportunities and earn them in college. But whereas, Sasha Boumediene is also a player that has accelerated. Adam Fantilli accelerated. Macklin Celebrini accelerated. He was 17 all season long in college hockey last year. Cullen Potter will be, 17 until January 10th. And then he will become 18. And so, he is older than when Macklin Celebrini went in there. But we're talking about vastly different players. We're talking about vastly different skill sets. And we're talking about vastly different readiness. So Cullen Potter in the end becomes one of the more fascinating players, because I do think this is a bit of a risk. I think that this is something that we'll have to wait and see. You look at the all-time NTDP scoring list for under 17 season, and he's somewhere in the 40s, which when you consider the quality of the NTDP, that is actually very good. Most of the players that are above him on that list are in the NHL. I do think it's a risk for all parties, including Arizona State, where if you get a top player, there's a lot of expectation. You've got to play that player. If it turns out that player isn't ready, how do you handle that? So it's going to be very fascinating to watch. It is an interesting case study for this year. That is one I will be very fascinated to see. And I think Cullen Potter and Arizona State, if it works out, it's going to be a great boon for Arizona State and their recruiting. It's going to be, they haven't had many elite players. They've had Joey Decord, as an NHL regular. And so that's, but there has not been a lot of the premium high-end NHL caliber talent that has come into that program. Cullen Potter looks to be one of those kinds of players. We'll see if it all works out in the end. Lastly, I wanted to talk about another fascinating player in this draft, and that is LJ Mooney. LJ Mooney, who is the cousin of Logan Cooley, and played last season at the NTDP. He did get called up to the under-18 team. He played on the third line at the under-18 World Championship. He is an exceptional talent in terms of his overall ability. He is probably the most talented under 2007 born player in the United States. However, he is listed at 5'7", possibly generously, and 150 pounds. I love watching LJ Mooney play hockey. I think he's aggressive. I think that he is competitive. He is highly skilled. He is crafty and creative, and he can make plays. He's committed to the University of Minnesota. He will stay at the under-18 team next year at the NTDP. He had a total of 53 points last season between the two teams, including a point per game while called up to the under-18 team. He had 6 points at the World Junior Challenge or World Under-18 Championship, and he had 7 points in 7 games at the World Under-17 Challenge. And very good player, but being a good player and being a good prospect are two different things. And at his size, it is going to be challenging for teams to view him as a first-round draft prospect. On talent, absolutely, he is in that mix. But when you're a 5'7", slighter build player, you have a lot more to prove. And that's going to be the tricky part for LJ Mooney. And I like the player a lot. I think he's got a ton of potential. It comes from the Pittsburgh area. We've seen what Logan Cooley has done. And really LJ has been one of the top 07s for years in the United States. But there are going to be a lot of questions about the size, and that is going to be something we talk about all season long. Is he going to be an NHL player at that size? Brian Giunta was an NHL player at that size. You think about different players that have made it, have been regulars, but are those players going to be first round caliber prospects? That is a big question that has to be answered by LJ Mooney. And if he has an explosive season, if he, defies all odds, if he makes the World Junior team somehow, if he, it's going to be a hard team to make this year, all these different things, then you have to start having that conversation. But I was thinking back to when I was at the national team program, we had Rocco Grimaldi, 5'6", but a bulldog on skates, was our leading scorer, was a big time player. And his career, he has played in the NHL, some largely has been in the AHL, and that is an elite level 5'6" player. TJ Tynan, other players like that just didn't have the size necessarily. So LJ Mooney has a lot to prove, but he is one of those prospects that I think has the potential to kind of defy things. And if he grows a couple of inches, like I remember back Cole Caulfield's combine, we were all talking about, okay, let's see what the measurement says. And him measuring it at 5'8" instead of 5'7" mattered a lot. And if LJ Mooney measures that 5'8" or 5'9", or if that happens, that does change the dynamic of his draft profile. You don't think it would change it that much. It changes it dramatically because it's all about probabilities, and the probabilities of a player at that size are low, no matter how talented they can be. So that is really going to be one to watch. So this draft class has so much. I mean, we're only scratching the surface of this class. And now we're getting ready for this season, and I've given you a number of fascinating players to keep track of, but I mean, the list goes on and on. We didn't even talk about Malcolm Spence that much beyond mentioning him. William Moore from the National Team Development Program. Again, LJ Mooney might be the better player now, but you look at the long term, and Moore has the size and the power and the different strength, and he had a productive season. You look at other guys, Caleb Desnoyers, who plays for Moncton in the Q and had a really nice season, also played on that under 18 team for Canada. Jacob East Wozniak, who played for Sweden at that tournament, and he is going to be real interesting to watch. He had 50 points in 36 games in the U20 league. Luka Radivojevic, who is the son of Branko Radivojevic from the NHL. He's playing in Sweden. He's trying to make the team. He is actually not going to play at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. So there's a lot of players that we're going to be watching in this class that I think are going to be really, really exciting, including a goaltender that we're going to talk about in the World Junior Summer Showcase section, which we're going to get to right now. We're going to move on from 2025. We're going to talk more now about the World Junior Summer Showcase, which starts next week on Friday of this week as we record this podcast. It is hosted in Plymouth, Michigan. FloHockey will be there. Myself, Liz Child, also have our one of our best in the business shooters with us, Taylor Doganeri, who is going to be creating some amazing video content for us like we did last year. But this is going to be a very interesting camp for Team USA because they enter as the defending gold medalists. And Team USA has never repeated at this tournament. They have never gone back to back at the World Juniors. They've done it at the under 18 level. They have not done it at the senior level. They have done it, they've won multiple gold medals over the last decade, but not consecutively. And that seems to be like the next step for this is you've strung a good year. You had a good year. Can you string a few together? Canada's, won 5 in a row, and we've seen Russia back in the day of the USSR won many in a row. But USA has never done it. And I think it's very hard to do because the rosters change. But USA is in a great position to do it. They've brought back the entire staff from last year's team. David Carl is going to be the head coach. He won both the World Juniors and the NCAA National Championship in the same year. He's got 2 national titles as a coach. He's got 1 World Junior now. He's been part of winning teams and winning cultures, and now he's trying to make this go again. He'll also have as many as if say Will Smith became available, they could have as many as 11 returnees from last year's team. And they've got their starting goalie back, Trey Augustine. They've got some of their top performers, Zeev Buyum, who had that tremendous season, will now probably be their number 1 defenseman this year. You've got Ryan Leonard, who is committed to come back. And one of the big reasons that he did go back to Boston College instead of joining with the Washington Capitals when he had the chance was to be part of this team and to be the captain potentially of this team. And I think he's got a great chance to be that. He is one of the leaders of this age group. And now after having an outsized role as a younger player last year and scoring some big goals, including in the gold medal game with the old, trying to blow kisses to the Swedish crowd after he scored. He's ready to go, and that's a guy that's going to be a big time player for them. The World Junior Summer Showcase, if you've never experienced or never heard of it before, is an evaluation camp. USA will have 46 players there. There will also be teams from Sweden, Finland, and this year Canada will return for a couple of games in Plymouth. They're also going to play a few games in Canada as well for this event. And so it is star-studded. There is really few places that you will be able to see as many top caliber prospects, because you think even great prospects get left off these teams all the time, but they're all going to be here. These extended rosters will be here, and you'll have a number of first-round draft prospects from the U.S., from Canada, from Sweden. I think there should be 1 from Finland at least. So there are going to be top level players. And as far as summer hockey goes, it's really competitive because you've got the U.S., which will be split up into 2 teams before they cut the roster down and make it 1 team to play in the end of the tournament. There is so much talent that it makes your head spin almost. So I'm excited to get there because I think it's going to be a really interesting event. The schedule is full of games between these 2 teams. It is highly competitive. These players are vying for spots at the World Junior Championship, and this is one of their best opportunities with everybody under the same roof for these coaches to compare and contrast these players. And how you perform in this event is going to have a significant say in whether or not you make the team, because it is the one time you're all together, you're playing the systems, you're playing the roles, the coaches are getting a feel for how you compete. And so at the end of July going into August, we get this tremendous hockey event. And so I'm really excited to get there. Among the players, they're draft eligibles. We talked about James Higgins, Porter Martone, Malcolm Spence. And one of the real fascinating guys that I teased a little bit ago is Joshua Ravensbergen, who plays for the Prince George Cougars, had a really strong season last year and is probably going into this season as one of, if not the top goaltender for this draft. 6'4" goalie, right catching goalie as well. And he's from North Vancouver. What is in the water in North Vancouver and Vancouver, where they're churning out all of these incredible prospects? You got Bedard, you got Celebrini, you got Ravensburg, you got Chloe Permerano on the women's side. What's going on here? But anyway, Ravensburgen had a .931 save percentage, including 3 shutouts in 12 playoff games, a 9-2-1 record for Prince George. And then on top of that, just really an outstanding job by him over the course of the season. So he will be among Canada's goalies at this event. Some other players that are going to be there that are of note. These are just the first rounders from Canada. Oliver Bonk, Sam Dickinson, Tanner Molendijk, Zane Parekh, Carter Yakimchuk, Colby Barlow, Cole Bodoin, Berkeley Catton, Easton Cowan, Tisha Ginla, Jet Luchenko, Bradley Nadeau, Callum Ritchie, Beckett Seneca, Matthew Wood, and Braden Yeager. And Wood, Yeager, a number of the other players that I mentioned were on the team last year and will be there once again this year. And it is going to be a very good Canadian team. And I think that is going to make this event even better. Sweden will have a number of notable players as well. Victor Eklund, who is draft eligible this year, Theo Lindstein, Tom Olander, Leo Salon, Wallenius, Lucas Pettersson, and Otto Stenberg among the notables. Finland will have Emil Hemming and a number of other players, Atos Koivu. So this is going to be a really great event in Plymouth, and it's going to allow these teams to show some separation. But as I mentioned, for USA, this is a very significant time because repeating at this tournament has been elusive. It's something that they haven't done before. And now that they have this opportunity, this summer is a chance to set that all up. It's a chance to make it all work and go towards this goal that's has evaded other teams. And really, USA has gone back to the same coaching staff a number of times. Nate Lehman coached this event twice in a row. I believe Bob Motzko coached this team twice in a row. And now you've got David Carl. And I do think that this is a real opportunity, to learn from whatever the past was. Even when you have a lot of returning players as they do, it's finding the right mix of the new guys. And so that's going to be the question. I think the blue line is almost going to have to be entirely rebuilt. Zeev Buium will become the number one defenseman. Lane Hudson was basically the number one defenseman last year in terms of minutes played. But I think you've got that. Is Cole Hudson going to be an option for you? Is EJ Emery, who was drafted in the first round? Logan Hensler, who's draft eligible? Adam Kleber out of the USHL. This class, I will say about this U.S. roster, which I find absolutely intriguing, is that there are so many players that played in the USHL last season. I think an abnormal amount of players that played in the USHL last season, which is great to see because the league was highly competitive last season. It was absolutely, the selections were warranted. There's a lot of really interesting players here. I mentioned Kleber. You look at a guy like Colin Ralph, who's going straight from Shattuck St. Mary's into St. Cloud State. Andrew Strathman, who's won a Clark Cup. Guys like that. Austin Bernovic, who had such a tremendous season last year, getting an opportunity to come back. He's got some size. Other players like Noah Powell, who and James Reeder from Dubuque that had such a tremendous season. Brandon Svoboda with championship potential. Max Swanson, who was the USHL Player of the Year. There are a lot of really good players that are there. They also are going to have a few CHL players in camp. Lucas Fisher is a guy that I'm really excited to see in this setting. How does he perform? He's a dual citizen. He's got, an opportunity here to make this roster as a big shutdown defenseman. Joe Willis, who won a cup, the Memorial Cup with the Saginaw Spirit, going to be there as well. But then you just look at the returnees, and this is the real thing that I think, separates Team USA, that'll allow them to be, a real championship contender. On the blue line, you got Zeev Buium, Drew Fortescue, Aaron Menedian, who did not play at the tournament but was part of the roster. Trey Augustine, the number 3 goalie, Sam Hillebrand, both back. Trey Augustine, the starting goalie, and a big reason that Team USA won that gold medal. Ryan Leonard, Oliver Moore, Gabe Perreault, Kerry Terrance. Terrance was another guy that didn't play, but I mean, having those guys back, and then we'll see what happens with Will Smith, but I think he won't be available, so they have to plan for him not to be available. But you look at the number of players that are in this camp that are going to have a chance to return, and then the guys that either just missed out last year, guys like Paul Fisher, Zach Schultz, who won gold medals at the Under-18 World Championship. Tanner Adams, who had such a tremendous season at Providence College last year as a freshman. He's a guy that I think, he's been undrafted, but he's going to probably be a free agent signing at some point. There's just a lot, and there's a lot of first rounders in this group too. You look at Leonard, you look at Gabe Perreault, you look at all those other players, and there's really an opportunity here for Team USA to repeat. It's going to be hard in Canada. It's going to be in Ottawa. They're going to be in the same bracket as Canada. They're going to have the big game against Canada in the preliminary round. But it all starts here. So if you are a fan of the World Juniors, it all starts at this event. I believe the games will be streaming on USA Hockey's streaming platform. And then I think, we'll also see we'll have coverage for you as well on FloHockey.tv. So make sure you stay close to all that. We are going to have much more, including some pre-camp breakdowns, some during camp breakdowns when the cuts are made. We'll talk about those, all these different things that are going to go into this. But I'm fired up to see some of the best hockey that you'll see all season until the World Juniors come along in December. So really looking forward to that. All right. Moving on once again. And again, like I said, this is going to be a very, very quick Hlinka-Gretzky Cup preview, but I wanted to at least get you ready for it. The rosters are not yet set. Team USA is going to have a camp in Minnesota to finalize their roster. There's a number of highly talented players that'll be part of that team. Again, the National Team Development Program does not participate in that tournament, so they are not going to be. They won't have those players, so you won't see the guys like LJ Mooney and others, and then Hagens and Hensler are aged out. They'll be at the World Summer Showcase. They're not U18 players anymore. But Anton Frundell, I think this is the real opportunity for him to create a little bit of separation and show that he belongs in that top 3 conversation. He's coming off of an injury. He missed, the last couple months of the season with a foot injury, I believe. And so he's going to be coming back, and this is going to be, his opportunity. I think Sweden should have a very competitive team at this tournament. Canada will be the heavy favorites. They've got a lot of real talent on their roster, although will be without Michael Misa, who announced that he will not be participating at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. He did play in the event last year. He, of course, the exceptional status player, apparently trying to work through some things to get ready for his draft season, and it maybe isn't fully healthy. Also played well into the summer with the Memorial Cup. And so that is he will not be playing. But Gavin McKenna, as I mentioned, will be. So this will also be a preview for the 2026 NHL Draft. And if you watch the Under-18 Worlds, you already know that this is probably going to be a dominant performance from Gavin McKenna. He is expected to put up an awful lot of points. And I really do think that when all is said and done, he is going to push for a spot on Canada's roster. The tournament dates, August 5th through the 10th. It is in Edmonton this year. They've been alternating between Slovakia and Edmonton. It'll be back in Edmonton, so most games will be at Rogers Place, I believe. And then on top of that, TSN will broadcast the tournament. I believe NHL Network will carry the U.S. games in the United States as well, so you will be able to watch the tournament if you have that platform. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It's a great event every year. To me, the one thing I'll say every year, you can only read so much into summer hockey, World Junior Summer Showcase, Ivan Hlinka, all those things. But it does provide a bit of a baseline, and it allows you to kind of see where guys are at, allows you to kind of prepare to go into the season. I've seen many players dominate at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup only to completely fall down the draft boards and not really live up to that. I've seen plenty of guys that had terrible Hlinka-Gretzky Cups that rose to the occasion and became top-end players. Lots of guys that didn't even make the team come out and have a great season. You think about Atos Koivu last year, not making Finland, ends up being a big part of their Under-18 World Championship team. Tija Ginla was not at the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup last year, and he goes 6th overall to Utah. So there are a lot that can happen. It's a tournament that basically just kind of whets the appetite for the season, and that's what this will do once again. All right, let's talk about a couple of other news and notes around the prospect world before we get out of here, because there is a lot happening. And one thing that is seismic, and if you are a Philadelphia Flyers fan, it's real. He's here. Matvei Michkov has landed in Philadelphia. He was picked up at the airport by Danny Briere and Keith Jones and a whole contingent. And apparently he's going to give a press conference the day after this podcast is recorded, so we won't have reaction to that. My expectation is that he will play in the NHL immediately. Maybe he'll get some time in the AHL. We'll have to see. You do have to, I haven't seen the betting lines for the Calder Trophy yet, but I'm sure Michkov is going to be very high on them. And I think it's okay to pump the brakes on that a little bit, because as good as Michkov is, and as intelligent of a hockey player as he is, and as strong as he has gotten, there is going to be an adjustment period. It's a different game that we play that is played here in the NHL. I don't play it because I'm not good enough to play it in the NHL. But this is going to be an adjustment for him. And so I think you have to let a player ease into it. Philadelphia has to get this one right. He's a critical piece of the future of their team. How is he going to interact with John Tortorella? How is he going to interact with the physicality of the game? How is he going to interact when he's not scoring? How is he going to act when anything, what kind of adversity hits? This is a player that's been through a lot in his young life already. Lost his father a couple of years ago. Has kind of been through the rigmarole of the Russian development system. Has been loaned out to teams. His contract was terminated that allowed this. I think this is going to be a very fascinating player to watch this year. I can't wait to see it. I just think, the Calder hype, settle it for a little bit. It's going to be a very competitive field. You've got Will Smith, you've got Macklin Celebrini. You're going to have others that are going to be in the mix as well. And I do think that Matvei Michkov is going to have an impactful first year. Will it be a Calder first year? That's going to be the question. Also in Russia, Ivan Demidov, interesting story in the Montreal Gazette by Stu Cowan. He basically said if Demidov does not make the KHL team with SKA St. Petersburg next year, the Habs are going to do what they can to try to get him out of there. Talked about a transfer thing. There is no transfer agreement between the USA or between the NHL and the KHL. Transfer isn't really possible. What is possible, and again, this is where we have to kind of be careful. I never thought that Matvei Michkov would be released from his contract early. That did happen. And because that happened, it does create this precedent and this idea that it could potentially happen for Demidov. One thing that it's important to note, as far as I've been told or have heard, the situation with Michkov that happened was basically he was able to get the contract terminated on compassionate grounds. Basically, as he lost his father, he wanted to live out his dream of playing the NHL. He wasn't going to be able to do that in the KHL. And, through negotiation and a lot of debate and other things with SKA, he eventually gets let out of his contract, which is a huge deal because he comes over early. With Demidov, it's interesting because he's in the last year of his contract. And if they're not going to put him in the NHL, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, and this is something that I think people misconstrued last time. When I said the NHL is not a good league, it's not a good league to prepare you to play in the NHL. And if he doesn't make the roster of the top team at SKA, if he's not on the KHL roster, he cannot be loaned out to another team in the KHL. He's in the last year of his contract. The rule states players in the last year of their contract cannot be loaned. They have to either play for the team or they have to play for the junior team, or he'll play in the VHL, which is a low-level pro league that is also not great for NHL preparation. So what can the Habs do? Honestly, they don't have any control. It's going to come down to what SKA wants to do with Demidov. It's going to come down to what Demidov wants to do. As of right now, I think the best thing that could happen in this case is that he does play for the KHL team next year. He plays a regular role, and there's a chance that won't happen. KHL teams are not in the business of developing players for other NHL teams. So that might not happen. So if Demidov ends up playing for SKA next year, it'll probably be a little bit lower in the lineup. It probably won't be the best year for his development. But I think if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, be prepared for him to enter North American hockey in the AHL, because that is unlike, Michkov played a top line role for Sochi. He got 2 years of KHL hockey. That's going to help prepare him get ready. Demidov hasn't had that. He hasn't had enough preparation. But if he does play for SKA next season, hopefully he plays a regular role. Hopefully he gets that development that he needs. Hopefully he gets that challenge against men, and we get to see a little bit more about him. All I'm saying is the hype train is a little out of control. You have to remember this is a player that, while very, very good, has still not been challenged at the top of the levels available, with no international play, with very little senior team looks. It's going to be difficult to know how he's going to transition into the NHL. So we'll wait and see what happens. I would be shocked if SKA lets him out of his contract this year. If they do, hopefully the Habs can bring him over. Hopefully he can play in the AHL. And even that will be a challenge for him because it is a far better league than what he had been playing in. So he's a great player. I think he'll adjust. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Can't wait to see it. But that is what we got on these guys. The KHL roundup that we seem to have to do all the time now. It's great to do because, hey, we've got a lot of great players from Russia that want to come over and play in the NHL still, even though everything that's been going crazy in the world. So we will continue to watch them and be very excited to see them. Well, so what's next? What's next for me is I'm going to be in Plymouth, Michigan for the next week. So you will not see an episode of Talking Hockey Sense or listen to an episode next week. We will be back in 2 weeks, however, when we kind of recap what has been happening and also update you on the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. We'll have rosters. We'll have some games under our belt. We'll be able to talk a little bit about that. I will be back next week, but we are going to, or not next week, but the week after. And so we will have a ton of coverage of the World Junior Summer Showcase on FloHockey.tv. We will have videos on our social. We will have analysis on the page. We will have a lot of player scouting reports and different things like that. So make sure you are staying close to FloHockey.tv all next week as we get into the World Junior Summer Showcase and also talk a bit about the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup. There's going to be plenty of NHL draft coverage. And there are so many exciting things on the horizon for FloHockey, things that I can't wait to tell you about, things that I can't wait to talk more about, because it is going to be an amazing 2024-25 season that we have in store for you on Flo. From the coverage, from our original pieces, from everything else that we're doing, there is so much to be excited about. So I can't wait. I hate to leave you another week hanging, but you'll have to hold on to this episode, maybe listen to it in chunks. Although if you're listening this far into it, it's too late for that, but whatever. But yeah, I think I'm going to go, maybe play a little college football 25 and wear my Iowa State hat, go Cyclones, and get ready for this World Junior Summer Showcase. I think we're going to have a blast with it and hope you guys come along for the ride. Want to give a huge thanks to Nikki for producing today's show. Want to thank all of you for listening to the episode. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk more about the World Junior Summer Showcase, the Hlinka-Gretzky Cup, the 2025 NHL Draft, the upcoming college hockey season, the prospect tournaments. All that stuff is coming. We will have you covered right here on FloHockey. That is going to do it for this week's episode of Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. We'll catch you next time.